ENG 80R 5006 American Literature Unit 2 Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening Robert Frost Introduction Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening is a inspiring poem by Robert Lee Frost. There are four stanzas in the poem. Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening is a poem written in 1922 by Robert Frost. It published in 1923 in his New Hampshire volume. Imaginary and prophesnication are prominent in the work. In a letter to Louis Admirer, Frost called it "my best bid for remembrance". Frost wrote the poem in June 1922 at his house in Shaftesbury, Vermont. He had been up the entire night written the long poem New Hampshire. It had finally finished when he realized morning had come. He went out to view the sunrise, and suddenly he got the idea for stopping by woods on a snowy evening. He wrote the new poem about the snowy evening and the little horse as if Lee had a hallucination in just a few minutes without strain. The poem is written in iambic tetrameter in the Rubaiyat stanza created by Edward Fitzgerald, used in Eulogies. In early morning of November 23, 1963, Sid Davis of Westinghouse Broadcasting. It reported the arrival of President John F. Kennedy's casket to the White House. As Frost was one of the president's favorite poets, Davis concluded his report with a passage from this poem. He was overcome with emotion as he signed off. At the funeral of former Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau on 3rd October 2000, his eldest son Justin rephrased the last line of this poem in his eulogy. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep. He has kept his promises and earned his sleep. In popular culture, American composer Randall Thompson included the poem in his choral work, Rostinia, Seven Country Songs, which was originally conducted by Thompson with Frost in attendance. Another choral interpretation, titled "Sleep", was written by American composer Eric Whitehair. Due to copyright, the text of the composition was rewritten by Charles Anthony Silvestri to comply with the wishes of Frost estate. The poem is discussed in the Sorfanos episode "Forsyth Liviska", in which Meadow explains the poem meaning to her brother A.J. In the 1977 Cold War thriller "Elcon", the last stanza is used as a trigger phrase to activate the brainwashed sleeper agents. In the Quentin Tarantino's film "Death Proof", the final stanza of the poem is used by Jungle Julia as the secret phrase. Her listeners must say in order to receive a lap dance from Julia's friend while they are out on the town. The night passes and the only person to approach the girls and repeat the line is homicidal stunt man Mike, played by Kurt Russell. Literacy devices. Robert Frost written the poem of stopping by woods on a snowy evening in first person point of view. It is an iambic pentameter, four quatrains: AABA, BBCB, CCDC, DDDD. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening can be symbolic for many things. In this case, it probably means rem- reminiscing past memories when a person is in the older years on their life. In the first stanza, prose narrator states that he is passing some woods of a man who lives in the village watching them fill up with snow. Line number 4. Woods are symbolic for life, and while the snow indicates winter, this could mean the narrator is elderly. If that symbolism is added to that stanza, the first stanza quite possibly means that the narrator is an aged man. He looking at his life, remembering all in with which has happened in it. On to the second stanza, the narrator mentions that he is between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of year. Lines 7 and 8. Symbolically, this represents that he is at the beginning of the end of life. However, in line 5, the narrator barely elucidates that he is riding a horse and stops it without a farmhouse near line 6, which corresponds to the third stanza. My little horse at line 5 in the third stanza is given human characteristics because the horse asks if stopping between the woods and frozen lake is some mistake, and the horse is then even more confused for the only other sound is of the wind and snow falling. Lines 13, 14, 15, and 16 in the fourth and last stanza of Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening says that although the woods are lovely, dark, and deep, and line number 13, the narrator has promises to keep, line number 14, and miles to go before I sleep, line number 15 and 16 translated into symbolism. This means that although life is mysterious and wonderful, he has obligations to keep and much to do before his last breath, and dies. True rhyme. True rhyme occurs during the lines of 13 and 14 with the words deep and keep. These words are true rhyme because only the first syllable does not rhyme. There is one example of internal rhyme is he and me, line 3. Symbols. Symbolically, the horse the narrator implicates can symbolize something that guides him through life. In lines 5 and 6, the narrator voices, my little horse must think it fair to stop without a farmhouse near. Line 5 and 6. If the horse is symbolic for something that is guiding him through life, such as a person whom he loves, this could mean that such person thinks it hard for him to stop without a farmhouse near. If this is to be so, then later in Frost poem, then when the narrator says he gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. Line 9 and 10. This could mean that the person is trying to get the narrator's attention to ask him questions about his life or the end of it, because the next lines, the only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake, line 11 and 12. It can mean the narrator might not have an answer to the person's question. The reasoning for this is that if the narrator asks these questions and the only other sounds is of easy wind and downy flake, then that means that out of the sounds that is supposed to be there, there is only the questions and not of the response. Literary elements. Another literary element in the poem Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening is personification. The first example happens in line 5. My little horse must think it queer. The next example of personification is in the third line of the third stanza, for it reads, to ask if there is some mistake. Robert Frost's poem Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening as an example of conjunctive and denotative word meanings. Fourth stanza, third and fourth lines, the word sleep is an example. Denotatively, sleep means to take the rest offered by a suspension of voluntary bodily functions. The natural suspension, complete or partial, of consciousness or to cease being awake. How Frost means sleep through is the connotative meaning though. Frost means for sleep to be death. This changes the meaning of the lines completely. Robert Frost writes the poem "Stopping by the Woods on Snowy Evening" in first-person point of view as symbolic meanings hidden in it.